Hello, everyone. The following is a talk that I believe was given by S.M. Lockridge. I haven't been able to confirm that yet, but I can't find a recording of it anywhere. I do know that S.M. Lockridge did a recording of It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. This one's called It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. But yes, I don't see a recording. I can't prove that it's S.M. Lockridge. And the text, the content is different, similar, but different. So I'm not sure whether it's him or not. Anyway, let's get into it. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. It's Saturday, the day before Easter. On the Christian calendar, we often forget this day. Yesterday was Good Friday. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday. On Friday, Jesus is crucified, dies for our sins. His followers mourn. On Sunday, Jesus is resurrected. He's risen. He's risen indeed. His followers rejoice. But on Saturday, Jesus lay in the tomb. Earth groaned. His followers waited, confused. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. Holy Saturday, the day of waiting. On the church calendar, Saturday is known as Holy Saturday. While there are services on Friday and on Sunday, this day is traditionally a day of waiting. Holy Saturday is a lot like life this side of heaven. We wait. Our final resurrection is sure. Our victory is certain, but this side of heaven, we face death daily. Saturday, the day in between, the day between earth and heaven, hurt and healing, waiting and receiving, faith and sight. It's Saturday, but Sunday is coming. The message of Holy Saturday. The message of Holy Saturday is wait. Something is about to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. Holy Saturday lasts so long. It feels like Sunday will never come. The 24 hours feel like an eternity. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. Death still surrounds us. Sin still tempts us. Sickness still wounds us. Suffering still pervades us. Evil still invades us. Satan still taunts us. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. Easter is coming our direction. By the way, Easter means resurrection. In Narnia, under the curse of the White Witch, it was always winter but never Christmas. For Christians, we live in the sure hope that spring is always just around the corner, just around the river bend. Easter has already arrived and it's coming in our direction. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. While we forever remember the crucifixion, thank God we're moving towards Easter. It's coming in our direction, closer all the time. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming, and it's not far away. All we have to do is hold on for a little while, and Sunday will soon be here. Saturday may seem like a long time, but that's only as we count time. Hold on, keep believing, never give up. Wait. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming soon. Hold on for a little while longer. The final victory. Death will not have the last word. The tomb will empty. We will celebrate the resurrection. It's Saturday, but Sunday's coming. Thanks for joining me. Catch you next time. Okay. So was Pelagius really a Pelagian? This scholar claims not. Oh, come on. I That's what we actually want.
You read Rowan Greer in his...
So this is on
You're known for your work
Latent Flowers
on
channel.
Pelagius.
Ali Bonner is the guest. I guess that's Alison, shortened to Ali.
The British monk from the late or early 5th century, late the 4th century. And I appreciate your work because I think it brings a lot of light to an otherwise heated discussion. And you've written a book that's pretty well known among those of us.
And for those who are new to this, Leighton Flowers is not Calvinist. He claims that he used to be, and some Calvinists dispute that, but I think the evidence is pretty convincing that he did believe Calvinism, convinced of it by R.C. Sproul, and then came to question Calvinism because of C.S. Lewis and what's his name? Completely forgotten his name. From the 50s and 60s, warning the church of exactly what has happened. And he was shocked to find out these people weren't Calvinists. I thought Calvinism was the only option as a biblical question. No, it's not. He's developed a system called provisionism, which he also calls traditional, because it was the traditional belief. At least in his claim. I think it was the traditional Southern Baptist belief. Anyway, he's now relabeled it provisionism to avoid that dispute. Ali Bonner studies Pelagius. And let's keep listening.
Us theologians that like to study such things, called The Myth of Pelagianism. And I just want to know a little bit more about your work. Why write on Pelagianism, and why title a book The Myth of Pelagianism?
So the reason for writing about it is because Pelagius is the first known British author. And in the longer perspective, I think he had an effect on the history of what was happening within Britain in the late Roman and particularly the post-Roman period. So this is about religious ideas, about what we might call ideologies, but they have a social and potentially political application. So I was studying this and looking at manuscripts and wanted to know what was going on in Britain and wanted to study a British author. And because he was a very important figure, I suspected that he had, there were implications for the history, social and political history and religious history of what was going on in Britain. And therefore, that's why I studied him. That's why I studied Pelagius. But you cannot study Pelagius without obviously then looking at, in my case, manuscripts, because that's what we do in the university and the department where I work, but also the history across Europe and the accusations that were made against him as to what he taught.
So when you talk about the myth of Pelagianism, first, I think for our audience, understanding what is Pelagianism, a lot of laymen may not even know that term. What would you tell them if somebody just walks up and says, what's Pelagianism?
Well, first off, I would say it didn't exist. So I think it's a fictional construct. But that said, we can look carefully at what the ideas, the tenets that were attributed to it. So you can have two separate things. You can say, take the list of ideas, that the statements that were attributed to Pelagius and to this group that was alleged to exist. So Augustine described it as a new and very dangerous heresy, and he repeatedly described it as that. And he set out the tenets that he felt constituted it. But there are also church councils which declare anathemata, declare heretical certain theses, certain statements. So we can look at those collections of statements as well, and we can say, this is what they thought they were condemning. So this is what they thought it was. And then there is actually also, from later ecumenical councils, again, another statement of what constitutes this evil that we've got to suppress and put down. So we do have lists of tenets, of ideas. Now, the reason I wrote The Myth of Pelagianism is because 5 main reasons, but the first is a disjunction between what those statements say and what's in Pelagius's writings. So that there is of the 14 statements, half of one is something that's actually found in Pelagius's writings. 7 are flatly contradicted by him. And the half of one is that grace is given in accord with merit. Now, the second argument for saying it didn't exist is that everything he wrote had already been written at length, in detail, particularly by Greek authors, but also by other authors translating the Greek authors into Latin, so Rufinus of Aquileia. The one thing he did actually say that corresponds with the tenets had been written and was actually consensus view amongst a particular version of Christianity, which is Eastern ascetic Christianity. Now, in the Latin world...
Any comments so far, Kevin?
So is she claiming that the things that Pelagius believed were held commonly amongst the church?
Yep. We're Orthodox accepted Christianity at the time.
Okay. So my question is then, where do all these accusations about all this stuff he believed come from then? If he held to orthodoxy, why do all this heresy get labeled as Pelagius?
Well, that's what this stream is about. I haven't listened to this whole video because I found this a little too technical. And I really need a Calvinist here going, oh, that's not true, if they want to dispute this. Because otherwise I'm going to do this whole stream and then the Calvinist is going to say blah, 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 and then I'm going to have to do it all again. But yeah.
Well, let's jot some things down. Do you have your Word Microsoft Pad or something? Take notes on the claims of things he taught were orthodox, and then the things that he was accused of heresy. Maybe next time you talk to CJ, you can bring this up to him.
But CJ's never raised Pelagius.
Well, for instance, I've heard people like Veckel talk about, this guy's a semi-Pelagian.
Yeah. So I've got to wait. So I'm going to throw this out there into our community and see if a Calvinist responds to it. And if I can make sense of this video as I go through it, if I can sift through where this claim of Pelagianism came from, I think she's going to claim that it came from Augustine. Augustine, according to her, mischaracterized Pelagius so he could win this battle. But I need to listen to the whole video.
Right. So they had like a debate or something, right? Like, is that documented? Like, do we have that recorded? Like
Well, I think the debate was in writing. Pelagius said things, Augustine said things. They went backwards and forwards a bit. People were like reading these things and what's going on.
Well, maybe you can read the debate. That'd be interesting. The debate between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think she'll summarize it. Let's just listen to the video.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if you want to do more than that, you're welcome to. At the moment, my plan is to listen to this video and see where I go from there. Maybe it won't be conclusive and this is useless. We'll see. Or maybe Calvinists will just ignore it. I don't know. We shall see.
In Rome and Italy, the Greek fathers had huge authority amongst many Christians. They really did have enormous authority, and it was possible to earn a living translating, recycling, reworking those Greek fathers of the East. Athanasius of Alexandria, the Cappadocian fathers, Basil the Great, Chrysostom's the next generation. Ambrose translated, Ambrose, Bishop of Milan, late 4th century, 370s, 380s. He's translated Basil's Hexameron. It's not a close translation, it's a reworking of Basil, but it was possible to earn a living doing this. So someone like Rufinus of Aquileia did that. Jerome built a career on translating this Greek ascetic theology. Cassian of Marseille did the same thing. Pelagius was just one of many authors doing this. So nothing in Pelagius is original. Nothing. What that means is he can't have invented a new set of ideas. So those are the two principal ones. There are other things, but the two principal ones are those.
So just to recap, it sounds like it's a straw man, is what I put it in modern day vernacular in the way we would talk. Yeah. It was a straw man. In other words, it really wasn't what Pelagius actually taught. Yeah. So the danger of it wasn't really all that dangerous because it was a straw man. And then two, it's not new. It's nothing unique to Pelagius. It was orthodox, in other words, at that time in history.
Yeah. If you read Rowan Greer in his Fear of Freedom, he describes Augustine's theology as a new theology that broke with the dominant Christian ideology of the 4th century, which he described as the Platonic pursuit, a Christianized version of the Platonic pursuit of virtue. And Greer backed that up by looking extensively, for example, at Ambrose of Milan to say, Ambrose of Milan argues for effective free will. That's free will to evil and to goodness. Ambrose of Milan bases his ideas on that. And so that's why Rowan Greer said, right, this is the 4th century consensus, and it is radically altered by Augustine of Hippo.
Wow. Okay. Well, my listeners know that I'm a systematic theologian. That's what my training is. And so I grew up believing and being taught in my seminary classes and even in my undergraduate work and Bible that Pelagian or Pelagianism was this concept and idea, one, that we're basically good, that we're born basically good people. Everybody's naturally pretty good. We're not all that bad. And then secondly, that we can earn our salvation by our own good deeds, that we merit salvation. We don't really need God's help. We can do this on our own. Salvation can be earned through merit and through good deeds. And anybody can do that from birth because we're all basically pretty good people. As long as we don't let sin get the best of us, we can just basically do good. And that the initiative is not
that sounds a lot
God's
like,
on salvation, but man's. Man is the one who ultimately initiates the process of salvation.
Sorry?
So that sounds a lot like A's philosophy.
What's that?
What he was just saying there, that people aren't born, sinful. We're actually born good, and we can earn our righteousness. That's exactly what A's philosophy believes.
Is that what Pelagius was teaching?
That's what's claimed, yes.
Good, and that through God's help, that we're basically good, that we're born basically good people. Everybody's naturally pretty good. We're not all that bad. And then secondly, that we can earn our salvation by our own good deeds, that we merit.
Is this what Pelagius said or what people claim he said?
That's what people are claiming that he taught.
Claiming he said.
Salvation. We don't really need God's help.
Sorry, I'm trying to respond to Slim Jim while I listen to this. I wasn't listening as closely as closely as I should have been.
We can do this on our own. Salvation can be earned through merit and through good deeds, and anybody can do that from birth because we're all basically pretty good people.
So this is what people are claiming that Pelagius teaches.
As long as we don't let sin get the best of us, we can just basically do good.
Right.
And that the initiative is not God's on salvation, but man's. Man is the one who ultimately initiates the process of salvation. And so that's this rank Pelagianism, which to me, I've just abhorred that. I thought that's absolutely humanistic. It's horrible. It is bad.
You would.
Are all those straw men, or is that really what Pelagius taught?
No, essentially. John Henderson identified that the genius of he looked at religions and how they change, how doctrine develops. And he said the genius of neo-orthodoxy is it conceals its newness. So this is the invention of heresy in order to relocate orthodoxy. So if you want to develop a religion, and religions need to develop. I mean, Protestantism is, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, if it isn't Lutheranism, if it doesn't keep changing. So Henderson argued, look at this across several religions, and you'll see this is what always happens. In order to take doctrine forward, you need to you need to get the consensus moved out of being the consensus. So you need to suggest it's dangerous, and then you can introduce new doctrine. And you do that by saying, actually, this is what's always been believed. So the thing about the heresy accusations is they suggest that it's heresy, the new ideas are presented as what's actually standard, and that anybody who denies those is denying what is the furniture and has always been part of Christianity. Therefore, to deny predestination interpreted as preordainment, to deny original sin, that's heresy. But actually, this is the process of installing new ideas as orthodoxy. So the things you've described, of course they're not, of course they're objectionable, but they were designed to be objectionable. So the stigma of arrogance, of not needing God, that's a very clever label, enemy of grace, which basically means enemy of God. That's a very clever polemical strategy to label some as the enemy of grace. So there I went back to look at what does grace mean? And there are lots of meanings. It's any gift. In the 4th century and in the early 5th century, it's any gift that God gives to man. And that covers Jesus' coming, Jesus' teaching, Jesus' passion, his suffering, his redemption of our sins. It covers creation. It covers us created with free will. It covers special gifts of healing or speaking in tongues. It covers a range of things, but it is synonymous with gift. And most of those things are unearned. They're general gifts to humanity that we couldn't possibly earn. We could never deserve. They are unearned free gifts. So I looked at grace and how the term was used. And in fact, Pelagius uses the term grace a great deal. Now, you could say in some respects, some of this is after he became aware of being accused of not acknowledging grace. But the one meaning of grace that does not occur before Augustine is grace as an absolutist form of prevenient grace. So prevenient means it comes first. It initiates virtue. And an absolute form of prevenient grace means that nothing else can cause human virtue, and that this virtue is irresistible, meaning there's no human consent, there's no human participation. All virtue, and this is what's specific, this is not just prevenient grace, this is an absolutist account of prevenient grace. So it means it's irresistible, you don't play any part in it, and it causes all human virtue, and there is no human participation. And that then triggers the corollary that predestination, which had up until that point always been interpreted as God's foreknowledge of human actions that were in some way autonomous, even if it's a tiny amount, should be interpreted as preordainment. And that's where the notion of the elect comes from. Now, I'm not arguing theologically what's right and wrong, because all of these arguments are grounded in Scripture. They're all immanent in Scripture. You can defend these positions from Scripture. I'm simply saying, what Rowan Greer pointed out, but I would argue also, this particular account of an absolutist account of prevenient grace and predestination interpreted as preordainment, which requires original sin to mean it must happen, because it's because of original sin that humans can't act virtuously without the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. That is something new. Now, if you then go to Pelagius' writings, he talked about grace a great deal. He also talked about cooperation. And in a letter which is written on this very subject called On the Divine Law, he actually talks about, I don't want to make grace graceless. And he says, we need to go for moderation and cooperation. And grace indeed dismisses sins for free, gratuitously, but with the consent and the will of the believer. So what he was arguing for, he was standing up to defend what had been 4th century, it was the standard consensus at the time. So he wasn't introducing new doctrine, he was defending what was Greek ascetic theology. Read Basil of Caesarea, and read Ambrose, Ambrose is Roman, but read Basil of Caesarea, read Athanasius of Alexandria, and free will, effective free will, is taken for granted, and human nature. In fact, Athanasius of Alexandria is much more positive about human nature, but Athanasius and Basil of Caesarea they corresponded, and there are some echoes between.
I'm not sure she's saved. She seems to be thinking the human beings are basically good because of prevenient grace. But what prevenient grace is she talking about?
Prevenient grace? I don't know.
This is going to be difficult because I don't like where she's arguing from. So that makes me question, hang on, I'm going to have to do this myself, read through all of these, and I don't have them available. I'm not even sure that I have the time or the inclination to read through Athanasius and Clement and all of these people that she's mentioned, as well as Pelagius.
I'm going to do it. I want to start doing streams going through the church fathers, because I have all their writings out. I found an online library where they're free.
Okay. Well, if you do it, maybe I'll do it with you. Maybe we can work on it together. We can try and work together on what are they actually saying, because I don't like what she's arguing in terms of we're basically good. No, I don't believe that they were arguing that. I don't believe her, because that's a vile demonic heresy that's crept into the church far too early. I doubt that's what she's actually saying, what they're actually saying. I think she's misunderstanding them because she's not born again. She doesn't understand biblical truth. She's looking at it as a secular historian and determining that, oh yeah, they believe that man's basically good, because she misunderstands what they're actually saying, because they're writing to Christians who understand that man isn't basically good. And so they're making a different point than she assumes.
Prevenient grace, isn't that like I've heard that term.
Arminianism.
Isn't that what Arminians believe?
Well, Arminians talk about prevenient grace, but is she saying they use the term prevenient grace, or is she labeling what they're talking about prevenient grace because she's coming from an Arminian perspective? This is too confusing, because we're looking at something that happened nearly 2,000 years ago through the lenses of how we determine what those is. The same thing with trying to have a conversation with Roman Catholics. They impose, like Slim Jim, they impose their meaning on these terms. Oh, the apostolic tradition and the church and Rome, and it's like, oh yeah, but you've got to put those things in the context of the day, you slim-witted imbecile.
Yeah, Slim Jim is quite the oddball. I've talked to him twice now on Roman Catholicism. Actually, I did a live stream with him talking about Roman Catholicism, if anyone wants to watch that sometime.
That sounds painful.
You were in the chat and you left because you couldn't stand him.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah. You left comments like, this guy is such a liar.
And he's still lying.
I know.
Because he wants to just take a quote and assume everything he wants to assume about it. And it's like, well, yes, okay, so Irenaeus said that. He was wrong about Rome and about Peter and Paul founding the church in Rome. No, they didn't. What a load of absolute tosh. Paul went to Rome, was executed. They didn't found the church in Rome that then Rome eventually approved of. Rome is our enemy. The Roman Empire was absolutely pagan. The church was founded in Jerusalem by Jesus Christ. It is the height of blasphemy to say that Peter and Paul founded the church. And even worse, perhaps, I don't know, which is worse? To say that Peter and Paul founded the church, or to say that it was founded in Rome by them?
Right.
Both things are abhorrent, demonic blasphemy.
I know Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles, but yeah, he didn't start the church.
No, the church was started by Jesus Christ.
That's right.
It's just disgusting. It's a historical revisionism. It's demonic. It's so anti-Christian. Richard says, Leighton has that look like, how long are you going to drone on? Leighton's probably thinking, I might have made a mistake of inviting this woman on. She doesn't understand Christianity.
Basil echoes Athanasius, as indeed Pelagius does.
We'll see if Leighton can get it back on track again. He keeps going for another hour, so
okay.
He must think there's something worthwhile in this.
I compliment Leighton. He's got a lot of patience. He really does.
Oh, he does. He does. Yeah, he's very way more patient than I am. But I also think he's too soft. So, nah. But he has his place. I have mine, I believe.
So what I was saying was that a new interpretation of grace has come along, and Pelagius does refer to grace. And he does argue for a cooperative model. In fact, in his statement of faith, the last thing he sent to...
What do you mean by cooperative? That we work with God, or we trust him?
Right. Like, is she proposing some sort of synergism or something? Is that what she's getting at?
Yeah, well, once again, what do you mean by synergism? Because synergism, people use synergism to mean cooperate with, and cooperate can mean two things. Cooperate in our
Right.
works or cooperate in our faith?
Right.
And this is the problem that I have with this conversation. People aren't being careful with their language, and then they argue, they use this language, and then they project whatever they want into it. And both sides are using language against the other side, even though that language doesn't necessarily mean what the other side thinks that it means. And it's like, oh, so one person will say cooperation, but they mean by faith. And the other person will think that they're meaning by works, and so attack them. And the other person will think that they're attacking faith when they're actually attacking works, because they never clarify terms. People are too stupid and careless, it seems to me, to think, hang on, could this mean something else? And let's make sure that we define it carefully. And this is the problem I have with Charles. Charles doesn't do it either. Charles just starts yelling and screaming when people go, hang on, because he likes to assume what the other person is thinking.
To the papacy in his dossier of documents to defend himself, he says, I believe in free will in such a way that we always have need of God's grace.
Good. But that doesn't clarify all of this garbage that you've brought to the table now about, what's all these, people are basically good. No, they're not.
So to suggest that
is she reading that into Pelagius and the other writers?
Excluded God's grace, that he was...
I would like to see these quotes that brought her to this conclusion, because I'm confident they don't say what she thinks that they are saying.
An enemy of grace, or that he thought you didn't need God. At this point later, and I have to say, what really...
Yeah, see, my problem here is, JWs and Mormons and Roman Catholics, they would all say this same thing. Well, I'm not saying you don't need God. Yeah, well, which God? What do we need from God?
What matters is to go and read Pelagius' writings. If you go and read the 4 letters that we absolutely know he wrote, letter to Demetrius on the divine law, letter to Calantia and on virginity, it's very clear he would be the light. He never says we don't need God. You cannot find that in Pelagius' writings. He keeps... So that's why I would...
Yeah, but that's not clear enough. I don't think she understands what the debate actually is.
Say that the account that you were taught of what Pelagianism is was a very effective smear campaign. Yep, did a very good job. It created this toxic caricature that didn't need God, but it's not. You can't find it in Pelagius' writings. And at this point, I would point out that when when Augustine was scouring through Pelagius' writings to find material to use against Pelagius to show that he was arrogant, that he did argue that you didn't need God, that he thought you could do all of this, but you could be virtuous by yourself. He looked at works that we don't now have on nature and on free will, as I say, 2 works by Pelagius that don't survive. And the most that Augustine could find, the most incriminating thing he could find, was something that actually stated...
Hang on, she said Ambrose. Now she's saying Augustine.
The opposite, that stated that we did need God's help all the time. And Augustine had to say, and of course here he's lying. He's not telling the truth. So I think if Augustine couldn't find... If he couldn't find any, smoking gun triggers to show that Pelagius thought that man didn't need God's help, then I think it shows that that's not what... But we know from the letters that survive that that's not what Pelagius taught.
Dr. Bonner, as I'm listening to you, I'm almost tearing up. I mean, I know that's strange when you're talking about a historical event like this, and I don't know why I am. Maybe I didn't sleep very well last night. I don't know. But I know you're not real familiar with my work, but...
Really, Leighton?
In a lot of ways, when I'm defending as a former Calvinist, now not a Calvinist, there's a lot of things that about what I believe that are maligned on social media, people accusing me of saying things I've never even dreamed of saying. And I feel for him. There's this feeling I'm going, I know what that feels like. Oh,
Okay.
Leighton, you believe that men are so much better than they really are. You don't really take sin serious.
Which is a lie that James White continues to repeat, even though Leighton has explained what he meant by choice meats. And James White just ignores it and continues to smear him. James White loves to assume the worst of people, especially Leighton Flowers.
Yep. James White is a very arrogant man.
Nasty, rude. It's appalling how James White behaves. Really, really disgusting.
Yeah.
The arrogance thing that you were talking about, that just kind of you're really trying to just lift up men and make them better than they are. And when in reality, I think that what I'm trying to do is maintain, if anything, the blameworthiness of man by maintaining that they have responsibility. They're not just born that way. They can do otherwise. They have God's grace helping them. And therefore, when they're rejecting God, they're rejecting a God who loves and provides for them, not a God who rejected them before they were ever born. And
provisionism. We can't do it on our own. God's grace provides us with everything good. And if we accept it, particularly the gospel, so let's talk specifically about the gospel. God has provided salvation. He has provided eternal life. But we have to accept. As many as received him, to them gave he power to become the children of God, even to them who believe on his name.
Amen.
And then he saves us, who were born not of bloods, nor of will of man, nor of will of flesh, but of God.
Yep.
That's the promise of Scripture. And Calvinists love to ignore verse 12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the authority or the right, the permission to become children of God. We have to receive him first. Very obvious, the order there. Calvinists completely reverse that order. That verse doesn't say what Calvinists need it to say. Calvinists need it to say, but as many as received him, they had been unilaterally given. They were unilaterally elected by God to be the elect, so that they could have permission to become children of God, so that they could receive him, so that they could believe on his name. And that's what that new birth is, according to Calvinism. The new birth is something that God just does so that we are able to believe. But Scripture says we believe unto salvation. Calvinism's the exact opposite. So I don't know, is Leighton thinking with his emotions here rather than, is he thinking theologically? Or is he thinking, oh, they've done that to me, made false accusations? But anyway, we'll see what happens out of this.
Ultimately decreed for them to be born in such a condition that they couldn't even respond to him in his appeals to be reconciled. I mean, if anything, I'm trying to say men are blameworthy for rejecting God, if anything, in this battering ram of accusation of arrogance or humanism. You're just a humanist. You're whatever cost, you just got to defend the and bow at the altar of the almighty free will of man and give man all this power that he really doesn't ever have. And so I'm hearing you describe in the way that you do.
See, here's the problem. There are people that treat their free will as though it is God. Jack Smack's an example of that. Conditionalists are an example of that.
Yep.
Yeah, like Caesar's a perfect example. Those are two camps of people. They're separate camps of people because one camp claims to believe in eternal security, even though they have no security because they don't know the gospel. Right? These extreme free graces, so-called, these antinomians, they have a worship of free will. How dare you tell me? I've got my ticket to heaven, but how dare you tell me that I can't live my life however I want? And Caesar dogmatically rejects that idea and extends free will all the way up to I can lose my salvation, because he understands that we do need to live in righteousness. But both of them are worshipping free will. One from a more legalistic perspective and the other from a more Sadducean perspective. No, I can live however I want, but both worship free will. And both of them attack those of us who stand for the biblical gospel. They call me a Calvinist, so I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with the Calvinists on this issue. Both of those camps attack those of us who put God's sovereignty above our free will. But then Calvinists will attack me, thinking that I'm trying to elevate free will higher than it should be. And I get Calvinists attacking me as though I'm an antinomian or a conditionalist. It's my free will is primary. No, Calvinists. And to their credit, there are Calvinists who don't do that. So I'm not tarring all Calvinists here. But do people see how complex this is? Because there's so many different issues. And you can be wrong on that issue. You can be wrong on A and B, but not on C and D. Or you can be wrong on B and D. And someone else may be wrong on E and C, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you get it fragmenting into all of these camps, and you get cretins like Slim Jim saying, oh, well, see, that's proof that it's not the true church because it's so fragmented. As though it's God's fault that human beings are sinful. What demonic blasphemy is that? No, human beings do have arrogance. Even as Christians, we have arrogance and pride and hubris. And so, of course, the church is splintered on the surface, but underneath it is perfectly united. And the more that you dig, the more united you find the true church.
What was happening to Pelagius at his time, trying to defend what was commonly held as orthodoxy, being accused of all of these heinous beliefs that you're saying, based upon your studies, he never really taught. And I know exactly how he feels, because I'm accused of things I don't believe all the time. And so if there's 14 points that are being accused or charged by Augustine towards Pelagius.
And absolutely, Richard, that's probably the most disgusting thing about James White is he's friends with Dr. Michael Brown. Dr. Michael Brown is a rank heretic, but he treats Leighton as though he's the rank heretic, and Dr. Michael Brown as though he's the most wonderful person who's ever walked the earth. That makes me extremely suspicious about James White. Is he even born again? The lack of discernment in that area is monumental. That is a mountain that I haven't been able to climb over. That is extremely concerning. Leighton is so clearly my brother. And now, maybe I'm biased because I'm not a Calvinist. I like his theology. I disagree with Leighton regularly. I listen to things Leighton says and go, that's a terrible way of explaining it. No, that's wrong, Leighton. I regularly think that. But his explanation of provisionism, I believe, is the biblical gospel, even though he doesn't always explain it very well. I think I do a better job of explaining provisionism than Leighton does, but, you know, I'm not as popular for various reasons, partly my personality, how I approach disagreement. Anyway.
And your studies find that only one half of one of those points is legitimate. How did that go unnoticed? In other words, how is it that in the Western world that I live in today, in the year 2000, when I was in seminary, I'm still being taught that Pelagius taught these things? How has that not been noticed?
It's a really good question, Leighton, because I turned to that immediately. I thought, right, so I looked at scholarship, and I looked at people like Giovanni Martinetto, Tony Bolin, Henri Irénée Marou. Various writers had said Well, of course, Pelagius is just repeating Eastern monastic theology. So they did get to the point where they realized, and Martinetto realized, that Jerome actually switched positions in 414 suddenly, under a threat of heresy himself. So people got to the point of saying this. They got to the point of saying what should have been, this isn't new, but they didn't. What they actually just said, oh, he's just recycling. And Martinetto actually said that Augustine was ignorant of tradition, Greek tradition. So they got to the edge of saying it, but they didn't take the next step. So then I thought, why aren't they taking the next step? Actually, it's Rowan Greer who's the one who took the next step and said Augustine created this new theology. But others didn't, even though they were looking at the evidence and they acknowledged the evidence said that Pelagius could not have invented anything new, that this was all recycled Greek theology. And I think I then came to a range of, I think it's multifactorial. It's not one answer. So part of it is, why did it gain traction in 418? And then the next question is, why has it retained traction ever since? So in 418, there was a collapse in confidence. And Greer looked at wider pictures. He looks at, why is there a shift? Why is there this loss of confidence? Why does a negative account of man get installed? And remember, Pelagius didn't say we were all good. He said we could go either way. And he said it was the long habit of sinning that had ingrained sin such that we thought it was part of human nature. And it made it seem like it had to be an outside force if we ever did anything virtuous, because we were so, he said, we were taught, we were educated in sin. And
well, this is not helpful at all.
I don't quite, what was she saying there?
Let's go back and listen to what Leighton last said and how she launches. I don't think she's saved. She doesn't understand the gospel at all. And Leighton, to his credit, well, is it to his credit? I don't know. Leighton's just sitting there and going, oh, well, thanks for providing this information. That agrees with my position. And I'm like, no, it doesn't, Leighton. But he's trying to be polite to her, I gather, because she doesn't understand the gospel. So he's not trying to share the gospel with her. Well, why not?
Well, did this woman claim to be a Christian, or is she just a historian?
I don't know. I don't. But he's saying, oh yeah, that's my position. Instead of saying to her, well, I think you're misunderstanding Pelagius. He's not saying that we're basically good. From a Christian perspective, what Pelagius is saying is that we're able to do good from a human perspective. We're able to do a limited form of good. But I don't know, maybe Leighton just doesn't have the clarity to be able to think that way. Or, maybe he's more of a heretic than I realize. I don't know. Is he ignorant? Is he being polite? Or is he a heretic? Is this careless? I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
The world that I live in today, in the year 2000, when I was in seminary, I'm still being taught that Pelagius taught these things. How has that not been?
And then Ellie goes on and says that he's teaching the things that Calvinists say, well, that's heresy. And Leighton just sits there and nods his head and goes, yeah. So he's not teaching what the Calvinists claim. But she's saying that he is. But is that because he actually taught them, or because she doesn't understand Christianity? And Leighton, this is just too confusing, Kevin. This is not helpful at all. I need to go read Pelagius.
I hear you. Yeah, I'm sure his writings are probably free online too. We should probably, they're probably not that long. It's only, 2 letters?
She said 4.
Oh, it's
4 that we can prove that he wrote.
Okay.
Well, if I heard it correctly, that's what I heard.
Let me see if I can find them. Yeah.
But this is just getting confusing. And then Leighton's sitting there nodding away at her spouting heresy and claiming that Pelagius is teaching things that are heretical. And it's like, what on earth is going on here?
It's a really good question, Leighton, because I turned to that immediately. I thought, right, so I looked at scholarship, and I looked at people like Giovanni Martinetto, Tony Bolin, Henri Irénée.
So let's answer the question, does she claim to be a Christian? Well, she's an Oxford scholar, so highly unlikely. Earned her PhD on the manuscript transmission of Pelagius's letter to Demetrius. Subsequently, she was a British Academy postdoctoral fellow at Jesus College, Oxford. So almost guaranteed she's not a Christian. Before being appointed to the lectureship in Celtic history at Cambridge. Now, she might be an Anglican and claim to be a Christian, but one of those Anglicans that's not Christian, which many of them aren't. Her research focuses on Pelagius and Faustus of Riez, two British authors of the 5th century who wrote in Latin, and she has published on St. Patrick and Pelagius. She currently teaches on Celtic history, that is the history of the Brittonic-speaking peoples and the Gaelic-speaking peoples from AD 380 to 1170. Nothing about her being a Christian. In fact, all of the evidence is that she's not, but she might claim to be. And so Leighton is either accepting that as true, or he's politely granting and trying to conduct this interview in such a way that he's not stepping on her toes at all, not challenging her Christianity at all, even though it seems blindingly obvious to me she's not a Christian in the slightest little bit. She just imagines that she's a Christian based on a false form of Christianity. I don't know whether this is worth continuing with. Kevin, do you want to keep listening to her?
Graham, that is your call, man.
Yeah, but what do you want?
Well, I want to get to the bottom of this. What did Pelagian actually believe? What did he say?
But do you think we're going to do that by listening to this video, or do we need to go read Pelagius for ourselves and come back to this?
We probably need to read them for ourselves.
Right.
Is there chapters on the bottom of the video where they actually get into specific doctrines?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Nope. So there's a link to her book. I don't know whether we can read her book for free. Get access. You do not currently have access. Sign in with an email username. Yeah, so there's a link below the video, and you can sign in and read her book by the look of it. Let's try the sign in and see what I've got to do to sign in. Email or username. Wonder if I have to pay anything. I'm not going to pay a cent. Can't afford it. Register for an Oxford academic account. Already, our privacy, email address, Graham. Full name.
Download PDF.
Australia password. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm signing up.
So you're just going to read her book? Okay.
Well, that's the only information I've got. I guess her book would give us references. She doesn't provide any unless we keep listening to the video and then note down where she says, but she's not, I mean, this is not really well referenced. She's done nothing really to establish her credentials as a Christian. Why she's studying Pelagius. Why is that of interest to her? Is she secular? What's her religious position? Is she, excuse me a second. Yes.
No, I'm just stretching.
Okay. I tried to mute that then, and it didn't mute. Right. Every so often, my microphone drops out and stops working. You do not currently have access. Why not? How do I get access? Get help with access. International access. Access to content provided through institutional subscriptions and purchases. Right. So sign in to get access. Oh no, signing in doesn't give you access. Oh, you liars. Oh, there it is. So $52 US.
Well, I think I just found all 4 of his letters for free.
Yeah.
Opening.
Okay.
PDF
Well,
right now.
let's give up on this. I don't think this is useful. I don't think that Leighton is being helpful in how he's. Oh, Richard's provided us with a link as well.
So here, I'm going to copy. Here, Graham, here's the private chat. So here's Pelagius's, all of his, the 4 letters we have, free to read online. I'm looking at it right now. There's page 1, 2, 3. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all here. There's a preface. There's a contents page. Letters of Pelagius. Introduction.
So make sure you bookmark Richard's link as well, because it looks like a really good link.
Oh, okay.
Studies that have been done, how Augustine slandered Pelagius by Raphael Toshko.
Oh, right on.
Original sin, and so Pelagius reconsidered. Download with Google. Establishing a secure connection. Thinking about it. Maybe. Possibly. Still thinking about it. Come on. Oh, don't tell me it's crashed. Oh, I was going to restart my computer for this exact reason. My computer does not like to be left on.
Oh, do you have an update?
No, things stop working and I have to restart it every so often. Whosoever will may come, the tension between divine grace and human freedom. Well, the tension isn't between divine grace and human freedom. The tension is between divine sovereignty and human freedom. And even there's no tension unless you assume divine determinism.
Right.
Original sin and ancestral sin, comparative doctrines, James de Francisco. This looks like quite some interesting. Calvinism, an introduction and comparison with main historic Christianity. Semi-Pelagianism, the origins of the term and its passage into the history of heresy. That sounds like.
Oh, are you looking at that file I shared with you?
No, I'm looking at the one that Richard shared, and then there's all these other suggestions. Once I signed up for that one. Download all these PDFs in a PDF package when you upgrade to Academia Premium. No thanks. I'll stick with my single PDF of Pelagius Reconsidered. No, actually, I didn't want to stick with a single PDF. But, okay. You want to charge me money. Did you notice that Slim Jim responded? Nope, don't want to talk to you. Nope, don't want to talk to you. No, of course you don't, you coward. He doesn't give a reason, you notice.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, don't want to talk to you. But you are talking to me, you imbecile. Oh, you mean on a stream. Sigh. I'll stick with my single PDF, Pelagius Reconsidered. Download PDF.
See, the one I found is a little confusing because it's not only his writings, but it's someone giving their thoughts and commentary on what he said as well. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, I'll do whatever.
But this is I just downloaded a digital copy for free of a book called 4 Letters of Pelagius, Studies in Pelagius by Robert F. Evans.
But it does it include everything that Pelagius wrote in those 4 letters, or is it?
Yes,
quotes?
It's got it's his writings, and then he's
Right. So we can ignore the commentary. We can
right.
skip that.
Well, but he kind of mixes it in. So he has a page, and then he's got like a paragraph of Pelagius's writing, and then he gives like 2 pages of his commentary and thoughts on what Pelagius said.
So you just scroll until you get to the next thing that Pelagius said.
Well, yeah. Then he's got confusing things here. IDO ... QUI ... DEM 1530A in parentheses. I don't know what that means. And then he's talking about
what was the name of that scholar?
It's called 4 Letters of Pelagius by Robert F. Evans.
No. The scholar that Leighton was interviewing, was it Ali Bonner?
I don't know.
Ali Bonner. Yeah, because I'm trying to download this thing and
yeah. You know, there's a part of me that maybe wonders maybe Leighton has misunderstood what Pelagius actually taught. It might be possible that Pelagius, was actually a heretic. We shall see. See, that's the problem here is. So he published this in 1968. Oh, wow. Okay.
misrepresented.
There's a little bit of space to the second. Yeah.
I've only just logged into this Academia EDU.
Yeah.
I've already got 12 mentions.
12 mentions.
12 mentions and 2 notifications.
Okay.
Find all the papers that mention you. I'm very much surprised that you're mentioning me. It might be another Graham Gould. We will search for these variants of you. Don't assume that I'm the same as every other person that has that name. You idiots. I've never published in my whole life. I've never published a thing. You idiots. 2 mentions. I thought you said there were 12. Upgrade to view your mentions. Oh, idiots. You people are cretins.
Didn't you publish something on creation.com?
Yes, that's not publishing the way that they talk about it. And what do you mean publish on creation.com? I've never published an article on creation.com.
I just made a comment.
Yes, I've only ever made comments. I'm too lazy to actually go through the hassle of publishing the way that they require me to.
They're all in one thing.
This one here is the leftovers, and the new ones
So 129 pages. Preface.
Graham, here's another one right now. There's no hassle to this one. You don't even have to download it. You just click on it. You just click on it and it flips the page for you and you can just read Pelagius. Oh, there's one right here.
No, I've done yours.
No, this is another one I just found.
Okay.
You don't have to download it at all. How many pages is this? I don't even know. Pelagius' exposition of the 13 epistles of St. Paul. There we go. How do I zoom in on this? Oh, there it is. There you go.
Does he just quote him in Latin and then comment on it? So he doesn't tell us what he's actually saying in English. Okay. I don't know how to read that one.
Yeah, so there's that one, but here's this one. This one is in English. So let me present. I'll share my
Pelagius'
screen.
expositions of 13 epistles of St. Paul. There
Yeah.
are no reviews yet. Write a review. How do you download it?
You don't have to. Here, I'm going to share my screen. Do you see that? So there, I zoomed in.
Yeah.
So you do.
That's really hard to read, Kevin.
Oh,
I want to be able to download it so that I can present it in it. See, because look how much border there is around it. So it's only taking up less than a quarter of the screen. And then you have to try and zoom in. So you can't, because it's page side by side. So you got to scroll down one page and then scroll back up again to get to the second page and then scroll down. And then,
right on.
no, that's awful.
Okay.
Well,
it's free. I mean,
yes, it is. It is free. That's why it's free.
Oh, there you go.
It's,
so on the I didn't see that.
useless.
So on the sidebar, here, let me show this
sidebar.
Yeah.
Downloadable files, 2 formats. Get
See right here.
PDF. Thank
Yeah,
you.
3 little dots. Click.
Yep, found
download.
it. Downloading now.
There you go. You got it, buddy. Yeah, I will do so as well.
And here we go.
I so appreciate you doing that for me, Kevin.
And here we go.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Come on, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, that was quick. That downloaded so fast. And I've opened it. There it is.
Well, now I have to study Pelagius.
There we go. Look at that, Graham. That was quick. There we are. Pelagius, Expeditions of 13 Epistles of St. Paul.
Where's my downloads? Downloads.
Yeah, we'll get to the bottom of this. Well, I don't need the preface. I don't care about the preface.
Preface. It's pronounced preface.
Oh, yeah. Preface, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Pelagius and his commentary, a record of Pelagius research, page 1. In Pelagius, I don't care. Britain and Irish commentary on 13. That's what I want. So that's 3. Chapter 3. What page is that? The biblical text used by Pelagius. Introductory. The text of Pelagius' epistle, Pauline epistles. Oh, cool. Well, at least it's all here. Yeah. Well, I'll let you do the share screen and the reading since you have such an eloquent voice.
Okay.
So which one are we looking at? The expositions of Paul's epistles?
Yeah. Because I think that's what Augustine used to critique him. I think was that his writing his thoughts on Paul's epistles. Oh, and her name was Ellie Bonner, Graham, the woman that Leighton had on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I assumed that it was.
Yep. Ellie Bonner.
No. So this doesn't present in a way that is easily readable. Wonder if I should read this whole book.
Well, at least the section about Pelagian, Pelagius giving his thoughts on Paul's epistles. That's the part I'm most interested in.
Well, let's give a little bit of background to the guy before we dive into what he said. Who was he? At least according to this book, who was he? The name Pelagius. The name Pelagius is obviously Greek in ultimate origin, being derived from Pelagos, the sea. To judge, however, by the Greek onomasticon and indexes to inscriptions and papyri, it appears to have been comparatively rare in that language. The oldest instance of the name that I can find in Greek characters is in an inscription of Halasia in Sicily belonging to the period of the Roman Republic. The name, meaning seaman, appears to have had no vogue in the Greek world until about the 2nd or 3rd century of our era, but already in the 1st century before Christ, to the common noun Pelagos, along with its derivative adjective Pelagios, so meaning of the sea, had become a Latin word also. It doubtless became familiar to Westerns at first as a name sometimes borne by Greek slaves. So from across the sea or working on the sea, I guess. As such, it was kept as a cognomen or an agnomen on manumission. Half of these words, I don't know what they mean, but let's just keep going. We'll pick up what we can. In fact, there are at least 3 clear instances of it with this value in Latin inscriptions. In other inscriptions, it is found standing by itself. The oldest dated Latin example of the name is in an inscription of AD 45, both in Greek and in Latin. There are good many instances of the feminine Pelagia also.
All right, so it's safe to assume that Pelagian was he was a Greek then.
So take over the stream for a little while, Kevin.
And the fact that there was at least 3 instances of it with this value in Latin inspections and other inscriptions is found standing by itself. The oldest dated Latin example of the name is inscription AD 145, both in Greek and Latin. There are good many instances of feminine, however you say that, Pelagia. Yep. The Directory of Christian Biography, known as dozen, Then he starts giving some, what is that? 1884, 3-4 examples. Okay, so he's just going over like the history, the meaning of the name. Okay. Well, I gotta wait for Graham to come back to scroll down the page a little bit.
Need to pray for me to get my own place. The Dictionary of Christian Biography knows a dozen persons with the name Pelagius, besides 1 or 2 with the name Pelagia. Where are we? Though it is not a frequent name, it was thus sufficiently common to negative the underlying idea of some investigations that it was specially invented to represent the native Celtic name of the most famous person who ever bore it. That he was far from being the earliest Latin bearer of the name is sufficiently proved by the fact that more than one pope took it after his time. This clearly goes to show that the name enjoyed sufficient currency apart from its evil association with the celebrated heresiarch to make its survival possible among Christians. Finally, if there had been anything peculiar about the name, it is certain that Pelagius's adversaries would have made fun of it, but of this there is not a trace. Pelagius the Briton or the Irishman? Very little is known of the life of our Pelagius. The date and place of his birth and death are alike uncertain. His contemporaries are not even unanimous on the country of his origin, for while Augustine, Orosius, Marius Mercator, and Prosper speak of him as British, Brito, Britannis, Jerome appears to refer to him as Irish, Scotus. Professor Bury would reconcile the two statements by explaining that he was an Irishman born in Britain, or that they couldn't distinguish between the two. He's an Irishman and that had come to Britain, and so the most recent place that he was British. According to Roman usage, Brito or Britannis was applicable to any inhabitant of the Roman province or provinces named Britannia, and there is evidence of an Irish colony in Britain at an early date. Those two places are very close to each other, so it wouldn't be unusual for there to be overlap between them. But the fact that the name Scottish or Irish undoubtedly conveyed a reproach in Jerome's day tells us against the view that Pelagius was Irish. Claudian conveyed a reproach. Okay, but Jerome was the one who referred to him as Irish. Oh, so he called him Irish to reproach him, because the Irish were reproached and Pelagius was reproached, so he's just saying it as an insult. Probably because the church in Ireland at the time was closer to the truth, and these people were moving into heresy. Like Jerome. Jerome was a heretic.
Really? Oh, I don't even know what Jerome believed. I don't know much about him.
Claudian speaks of the Irish as cruel and in several passages refers to Roman conflicts with them. Well, yeah, the pagan Irish were. And Jerome himself, having learnt from historical or geographical works that the Irish had been guilty of a number or even worse crimes than that of cruelty, alluded to the Irish with contempt long before he ever heard of Pelagius. Certainly the Irish of succeeding centuries, and few apart from them, treated Pelagius with the highest respect. That's interesting. On the other hand, the literary style of Pelagius's work is so accomplished that it seems more probable that he obtained his higher education in Britain than in Ireland, which was never a part of the Roman Empire. The present writer is, however, more concerned with philological than historical problems and does not feel called upon for a definite decision on this interesting question. His commentary on the 13 epistles of St. Paul, which is going to be the topic of this tome. I feel obligated to call it a tome rather than a book based on what I've read so far. Whatever his origin, Pelagius appears to have found his way to Rome towards the end of the 4th or very early in the 5th century. We can only guess the purpose which took him there or the source from which he drew the necessary means for travel and support in the great city. The suggestion has been made that he had a serious disagreement with his father and that he in consequence left home and lived away from Britain for the rest of his days. Whether that conjecture be true or no, it is perfectly clear that he had received a first-rate education, and it may thus be presumed that he was of wealthy family. The records show that in Rome he lived a pure life in solitude devoted to sacred study. His deep knowledge of scripture will be sufficiently proved in subsequent parts of this book. He was also well read in the earlier Latin Christian writers as well as those of his own day. It has been generally believed that he had a first-hand acquaintance with various Greek Christian writers also. Certainly he shows on occasion the knowledge of classical Latin literature he had acquired in his youth. Marius Mercator tells us that Pelagius ventured before the devastation of the city of Rome to compose commentaries on the Apostle Paul and to circulate them among those on whose friendship he could rely. He believed himself to be explaining individual words or thoughts of the Apostle. Augustine's language with regard to this work is very similar. He tells us in 412 that he had read certain writings of Pelagius, who was reported to him to be a holy man, far advanced in Christian graces, containing short expositions of the epistles of Paul the Apostle. These two writers not only allude to the commentaries, but, as will be set forth in detail later, also make quotations from them. The book itself contains evidence that part of it at least was written not earlier than about 406. Also, the use of the Origen Rufinus commentary on Romans, Origen's another heretic in my opinion, was not possible before about AD 405. After the research of the past centuries, there need be little hesitation in affirming that no copy of Pelagius's commentaries with his name at the head of it any longer exists. It is probable that originally this brief and unassuming work was issued without an author's name, and that while in certain circles its authorship was known and in others where sympathy with its author's distinctive views was felt, his name was actually attached to it. The majority of copies remained anonymous. That indicates humility, I would suggest. Or maybe because he was so hated and being labeled a heretic, he just removed his name from it so that he could continue. I mean, if he was a heretic, he was doing it out of cowardice. If he wasn't a heretic,
Right.
he was doing it so that the truth could still get out.
Right.
And if he was a heretic, maybe not necessarily cowardice, but shrewd knowledge that if his name's not on it, well, his lies can still get out.
Well, I'll hold off on that. I'll wait until we finish this and then
Exactly.
make my own conclusion.
Exactly. I'm not swinging one way or the other with this. I'm more than happy to accept that maybe he was a heretic, but I'm also more than happy to accept he isn't. And we shall see. I will come to my own conclusion as well. And we'll see if our conclusions line up, Kevin. Won't that be interesting? From the time of Predestinatus down to the middle of I don't know what that is, but I assume that's some writing that someone had made on predestination. Down to the middle of the 7th century, not a single quotation from the commentary by its author's name has been produced, but between the anonymous commentary on the Catholic epistles of the latter date and the 13th century, we find a considerable number of quotations from the commentary labeled Pelagius, as Zimmer was the first to point out. Some of this evidence comes from glossed copies of St. Paul's epistles in Latin and needs considerable sifting before it can be safely used. It seems, therefore, best to start merely with the quotations in Augustine and Marius Mercator and to try to discover a commentary which, though lacking, as it inevitably must, the name of Pelagius, shall be proved by internal evidence to be a reliable copy of the seemingly lost production. Before proceeding, however, to this identification, it is a duty to record the appearance of certain modern publications that have a bearing on our problem. Wow. And then we have a long section of Latin. This is going to be painful. History of Pseudo-Jerome commentary in print. In the 9th and last volume of his edition of the works of Jerome, published at Basel in 1516, Erasmus committed to the press a brief commentary on 13 epistles of St. Paul, which he had found in a manuscript bearing the name of Jerome as author. The words of the preface to this part of his great edition are these, and then blah, 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 blah in Latin. No one has, I believe, ventured to dispute Erasmus's opinion. Oh, so you're not going to tell us what it means? Well, this is a useless book then. If he's just going to quote Latin, and not give any indication of what it means, then I can't use this book because I don't know Latin. This is a useless book, Kevin.
Oh, no.
It's just all Latin. And then he comments on the Latin as though we, the reader, understand it.
Oh. Well, I typed translated to English, and I was assuming he would have this book would have had it all translated to English.
Well, maybe these bits were originally in some other language, and they've been translated to English.
Oh.
Okay, so let me go back up here. I wish this scroll would scroll faster. J. Armitage Robinson, honorary doctorate, sorry. There's it. No. Introduction by Alexander Suter. Yeah. Oh, Google isn't as helpful as you think it is, Kevin.
Well, hold on. The part that was in Latin there, was he reading? Was that what Jerome said? We haven't even gotten to Pelagius's writings yet.
Yeah, but he's commenting on it as though we can read Latin. So when he gets to Pelagius, is he going to translate Pelagius into English? Or is this just going to be all Latin, 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 and then his commentary? And now we get French. That's French. Where are we up to? He's just quoting these people in Latin and then commenting as though we can understand Latin. And then we've got German. Good gracious, I don't know any of those three languages.
Yeah, this is just the introduction. I'd be curious if you actually get into the...
No, that's chapter 1. We're now into chapter 2.
Okay.
From the previous chapter, it will have been gathered that the Pelagius commentary encountered some strange experiences in the course of its history. Well, I can't gather that except by his commentary of what he claims is going on, which I can't verify any of his claims because I can't read Latin or French or German.
Right. You know what? I think I'm gonna ask Kelvy if he has.
This is useless.
A copy of Pelagius's work in English that we
in
can
English.
Read. Yeah, I'll find it. We're not done with this. We'll get to the bottom of this.
Right. So that's that one I find to be useless. Let's try the next one.
All right.
This 4 letters of Pelagius. Am I still sharing that? Yep, 4 letters of Pelagius. Right, let's get through this one then. Oh, this scroll's a bit better. That's much better. That other one scrolled very slowly. So preface, don't care. Contents, don't care. And blah, blah, blah. 4 letters of Pelagius. Introduction. Evidence will be presented in these pages to support the thesis that Pelagius is the author of 4 letters. These writings, in addition to some 15 others, were attributed to Pelagius over 30 years ago by Georges de Plinval, I assume. The world of Pelagius scholars has ever since in a state of confusion and disagreement over the correctness of Plinval's attributions. John Ferguson, blah, 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 blah. So this guy's going to prove that he's going to claim that he's going to prove that Pelagius did actually write these. Ali Bonner seems to accept that. There's only 4 that we can be 100% sure that Pelagius wrote. So he's going to attempt to prove that in this whatever we call it, book, tome. I'm more inclined to want to call this one a book since it's more accessible. Oh, come on. Blah, 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 blah. Shouldn't an introduction just be the book's coming up? This is a very brief summary. No, apparently not a brief summary. It's going to go on and 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 on. Is this included in the book or not included in the book? Why didn't you include it in the book? If this is important to be said, you should have included it in the book. Blah, 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 blah. Good gracious. We're up to page 30. Have I seriously missed where the... Oh, chapter 2. Okay, so somehow I missed chapter 1. Did you see chapter 1, Kevin?
No.
I did. Oh, there it is. No, chapter 1 is the introduction. Chapter 1 is an introduction. Okay, well, I guess.
Okay, so chapter 2, we actually start getting into the topic.
I don't know. I don't know. Is the introduction necessary for me to read? He calls it chapter 1, so it's not really an introduction. Plinville left himself open to serious criticism for his manner of supporting such a revolutionary treatment. Was at best suggestive, certainly not conclusive, not enough to set a few parallel passages aside when they take note of striking similarities, and then to add some general remarks about tone and method of composition. But over and above this all too cursory way, having vindicated one document, when do we get into what Pelagius actually said? He had a sure interest in the case of at least four general criticisms of Kermer's treatment. Okay, so back and forth between he didn't do it well enough and this person criticized him, but he did an even worse job. Wah. Kermer relies too heavily, blah, 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 blah. Everybody's a bad boy. This author's the only guy that's any good at anything. The De Vita Christian, am I being too harsh? Caspari, Fastidious. Oh, there's actually a person called Fastidious. That's me.
Are you doing a study with just Kevin?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'm streaming with people listening. Why?
Hi, Margie. The Calvinist last defense. Yeah, if we could actually get into reading what Pelagius said in English. So far, we found it in Latin, but I don't know how to read Latin. Neither does Graham. If anyone has, without all this extra commentary and blah, 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 if anyone knows of a source where you could actually just read Pelagius's writings with just his writings, could you let us know or send a link to us? That would be helpful.
Yes. Must be further remembered important scrap the letter ad Salantium hereafter cited as cell is one of spiritual and moral direction addressed to a married woman. Over 2/3 of it concerns Christian life and faith in general, the remainder being occupied with specific instructions on the life proper to a married woman. Okay, interesting. Sufficiently indicated points of contact between the contents of the letter and Pelagian teaching in general, and has also well pointed out the many similarities in subject matter between this letter and Pelagius' letter to Demetrius. 7 of the 10 manuscripts assign cell to Jerome, 2 lack any title or ascription, and in the 12th century Codex Berolinensis, the title is crossed out, and in the margin is written by a later hand, Apocrypha. Criticism since the 16th century has variously attributed it. Erasmus suggested Paulinus of Nola. Valasi pointed to Sulpicius Severus or Sulpicius Severus.
Man, they had some bizarre names.
A small treatise of Divina Lega, hereafter cited. Yeah, this is indeed all introductory blather that is unnecessary to our conversation. Right, let's keep going. I should have marked where chapter 2 was, what page it was on, so I could jump back to it quickly. So he's right to label this introduction. I wish he hadn't called it chapter 1. This could have been skipped over. We could have gone straight to chapter 1, parallel passages. The form of presentation of the evidence to follow will be necessarily a bit arbitrary and artificial. I have the feeling, Kevin, that we're not going to get the whole of what Pelagius says. He's just going to quote bits and pieces for the point of proving that Pelagius wrote these things. But we're not going to get a sense. Well, we'll get some sense, but how good a sense we'll get.
So he's only going to quote some of his writings, not the whole thing.
Absolutely. This is not going to be the whole thing at all.
Right.
And so we get blah, 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 blah about the stuff. I want to get to the quotes.
Yeah.
Okay, in the cases of Noah and Lot, there are no particularly striking parallels in expression, but there are the following parallels for the other three. Abel, Enoch, so between Vita and Dem, Vita, Dem, Ibid. Why didn't you say Ibid for that one? That's the same thing. That's what Ibid means, the same as previous. Well, you could have used Ibid up here, couldn't you? No. But he doesn't translate them. It's just Latin. So once again, useless, because we can't read Latin. Another useless work. Okay.
Really? So he just leaves Pelagius's words in Latin? There's no... Did no one bother to translate this into English?
Apparently not. If you want to read Pelagius, you've got to read Latin.
Good gracious.
I would skip past the root of Pelagius. Well, that was the only interesting thing in the whole book, Richard. Once we skipped past that, the book was useless. Okay, so that's that one. Now let's try the other two books that I downloaded.
Wow. Unreal.
It's getting more and more useless, isn't it?
That is so annoying. Why would you quote Latin? Like who that's a dead language. Who the heck reads Latin?
Scholars, Kevin, you ignorant imbecile.
Oh.
How dare you be so ignorant and criticize our scholars?
My dad's mom, my grandma.
Start learning Latin, Kevin.
Yeah, Grandma Anderson, when she was in school in the 20s, she knew how to speak Latin. It was one of the languages you could learn. It was Latin, and I forget the other. I think it was like Italian or something. But they don't teach Latin in schools anymore. This is like a dead language. Like, can someone translate this, please?
Yeah, how come it hasn't been translated? Well, it probably has, but it's so far off in the corner, because you've got to remember, Kevin, we're not prepared to pay for it. If we were prepared to pay for it, someone would happily translate it for us. But we can't afford to pay for it. In the world of theology, the name Pelagius has been synonymous with heresy. Pelagius is primarily known for his See, this is where Calvinists agree with Catholics. Pelagius is a heretic. Okay. Is primarily known for his relationship to 5th century theologians Jerome, and Augustine of Hippo. Pelagius challenged the church giant Augustine on the question of baptism, original sin, and the doctrine of grace. Even though he has been written off and dismissed as a heretic, it is worth spending time reflecting on Pelagius's life and theology. Numerous Christian thinkers and theologians have been accused of being Pelagians or semi-Pelagians. I like where this guy's coming from. Throughout church history, from John Wesley to Thomas Aquinas. However, it appears likely that Pelagius may have been misunderstood and misrepresented by figures such as Augustine. Yeah, he lied about him. The adjective Pelagian has been a convenient term of abuse in the Christian church, and Pelagius himself a bogeyman or boogeyman for upright clerics to evoke when wanting to frighten wayward members of their flock. This quote, Yeah, and a boogeyman that they lied about what he taught. How is he a boogeyman? Good gracious, people, calm down. This quote from B.R. Rees, how about you just deal with the claims from Scripture instead of, that's Pelagianism. Is it? Maybe it isn't. Demonstrates why the re-evaluation and re-exploration of Pelagius' beliefs is an important task of contemporary theological studies. Context and life. It is difficult to ascertain much about Pelagius himself. Many conclusions are grounded in educated speculations based on the limited information that scholars have. It is quite certain that Pelagius was a Briton, although it is possible that he was born in Ireland. The date of his birth is estimated to be sometime close to 350 AD, while his death is considered to be around 418, possibly in Egypt. Interesting that he went to Egypt. B.R. Rees explains that Pelagius was described as a monk by some during his time, including Jerome, who perhaps used this term pejoratively, in other words, as an insult. However, there is no record that Pelagius was actually a monk. He was likely referred to as a monk as a result of his ascetic lifestyle, which means monkish, like cut off from the rest of the world.
Graham, I'm so interested in this. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to dip out, though, but I'll be listening in the car while I'm driving.
Right.
That's. Well, I'm assuming this is going to be at least more than one part, so I definitely want to join it. Are you able to continue tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. I will be able to continue doing this for another 3 hours, I think.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
I can keep doing this for 3 hours.
All right. Well, God bless, and if there is a part 2, let me be in on that. I'll definitely go back and rewatch this later because I'm only going to probably listen to another 30 minutes or so. I'm going to hang out with my friends. So, yeah. All right. Well, God bless, and everyone in the audience. Love you guys.
Oh, Mark. See you, Kevin.
See ya.
Where was I? At some point, shortly after 380 or so, Pelagius moved to Rome, where he received a very good education. Thank you. With extensive training in the scriptures, as well as in both Latin and Greek patristic writings. In his time in Rome, Pelagius moved. Where was I? In his time in Rome, Pelagius gained a reputation as a holy and moral figure. While in Rome, he began to articulate his theological views in a commentary on the Pauline epistles, in which he set out his opposition to such Augustinian doctrines as the inherited guilt of original sin. Completely agree with Pelagius in attacking that. Rigid predestination, yep, completely disagree. In other words, determinism, completely disagree. And the necessity of baptism to spare infants from hell. Well, I love the guy already. Those are 3 abhorrently blasphemous doctrines. We are not guilty because of Adam's sin. That is abhorrent to believe that. And I know there are people who believe it, but I still think it's abhorrent to believe it, even if you're my friend. Even if you think this is, okay, well, then we can't be friends anymore. Okay, well, that's your choice. I'm more than happy to have you as a friend believing this doctrine that I believe to be completely unbiblical. It means that God is evil. Right? You're just redefining goodness to mean, oh, well, God can do whatever he wants. And that is not the God of the Bible. Hang on just a second. I completely stand with Pelagius. I don't know what his position is, but I completely stand with him in rejecting these 3 doctrines. Eventually, after the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410. Now, how many of you were aware that that is what Pelagius was teaching against? I've never heard that before. Oh, no. Pelagius was trying to teach that we are inherently good. Was he? Well, we shall see. I'm starting to see more and more evidence that Pelagius has been lied about in defense of Augustine, who had some abhorrent doctrines. Eventually, after the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410, Pelagius fled to North Africa. Oh, okay. But North Africa was a hotbed of heresy. I don't think that was a wise move. Why did you go that way? Because you're a heretic or because you were unwise? Right. North Africa, where he spent several years before arriving in Palestine around 415. In Palestine, Pelagius continued his rigorous dialogues. So that's a good move, getting out of Egypt. Continued his rigorous dialogues against Augustine. Here he encountered a venomous enemy in Jerome, who relentlessly attacked Pelagius through his treatise. treatises. During this time, Pelagius authored On Nature and In Defense of Free Will. A synod at Diospolos, wherever that is, was held in 415, in which Pelagius successfully defended himself and was judged to be within orthodoxy by the church. However, Pelagius and Pelagianism were eventually anathematized a year later by the bullies who had the power and bullied people into anathematizing him. Or, am I wrong? And it was carelessness that he was judged to not be a heretic the first time. Either way, the church made a mistake. The church is not infallible. However, despite the reluctance of Pope Zosimus, who overturned the previous ruling on Pelagius by Pope Innocent I, various councils held in Carthage rejected Pelagius's views and exiled him as a heretic. The setting of Pelagius's world is also important in helping us gain a better perspective of the nature of contemporary thought during the time. Storrs summarizes the context of Pelagius's world well in the following. Of that world, then, three facets are critical. First, it was a world in which martyrdom had ceased. Second, it was a world turning to the writings of Paul. And finally, for Pelagius, it was the world of Rome before Alaric, whatever that means. These facets played important roles in forging the identity of Christians such as Pelagius for a host of reasons. A perfect example of this is found in the fact that Pelagius wrote a commentary on Paul's epistles, and in the fact that Alaric, the Visigoths, and their sack of Rome, there you go, that's Alaric, led to Pelagius's exodus to North Africa and eventually Palestine. It is also important to note the theological differences between the Eastern Church and the Western Church at the time. Both of them were becoming heretical. Interestingly, the Eastern Church leaders did not seem greatly troubled by the Pelagian position in the debate with Augustine. Yes, the Eastern Church does not credit Augustine as a church father. They reject Augustine. They have their own heresies, separate to Augustinian heresy. It's pathetic, isn't it? People are so easily led astray. Now, remember, this is a debate going on in the 400s. Heresy had already started to creep in. Calvinists don't pretend that Augustine is perfectly in accord with the hundreds of years of church fathers prior to him. Calvinists like to pretend that there's a monolithic agreement among all the church fathers. The Roman Catholic Church tries to pretend the same thing. It's fascinating how much the Calvinists agree with the harlot. Absolutely fascinating to me. Deeply concerning. Now, I'm not saying that they agree perfectly, but you agree much more than I do. Way more. And that is deeply concerning to me. And I don't agree with Eastern Orthodoxy either. I'm not a big one for denominational labels, although calling me Baptist is probably relatively accurate, depending on what you mean by Baptist. Anyway, Of that world, then, three assets are critical. The world before Alaric. A perfect example is found in, is also important to note the theological differences between the Eastern Church and the Western Church at that time. Interestingly, the Eastern Church leaders did not seem greatly troubled by the Pelagian position in the debate with Augustine. In fact, many Eastern Church leaders thought that his teaching about sin and salvation was not as bad as Augustine and other Western theologians claimed. Still, it appears that the Eastern Church eventually labelled Pelagius a heretic as a means of gaining the backing of the Pope in order to defeat Nestorianism. God. That's pathetic. Cowardice. Politics. Trying to treat the church as a political entity. That's demonic. The theology of Pelagius. We only have rough portraits of Pelagius, and they are from the pens of his opponents. There are 7 extant writings of Pelagius and about a dozen or so fragments of his works, which come to us primarily through the likes of Augustine, who responded to letters that he received from Pelagius. Much of the discussion of Pelagius and his theology begins and ends with Augustine, particularly concerning the topics of original sin, baptism, and grace. It is clear that Pelagius rejected the Augustinian understanding of grace and the doctrine of original sin that was being articulated by figures such as Augustine during this time. Augustine was certain that Pelagius taught Stoic ideas, because he was a Gnostic. And typical of these people, here we go, we've got CJ. No church father is in perfect agreement with another. No, I'm not saying that Calvinists claim it, CJ. I'm saying that that's the impression that they give. They treat Augustine as though he is the church fathers. What else have I missed? It seems odd to me that the contemporaries of Pelagius almost unanimously saw him as teaching Pelagianism, but somehow these guys conclude that he didn't actually teach these doctrines. Well, what is Pelagianism? You've got to realize that by this stage, CJ, there's a lot of political wrangling going on. Did you actually live back then? Why are you making the claim that his contemporaries almost unanimously, when you're living at least 1600 years after the event? That's a really bold claim to make, CJ. Why are you making that claim? Are you just blindly defending Calvinism and those who teach it, and Augustine and his claims? CJ, I'd like to read Pelagius for myself and come to my own conclusion. And rather than you just quoting Pelagius, can you show me where I can read that for myself? First, then, you're to measure the good of human nature by reference to its creator. I mean, God, of course, if it is he who, as report goes, has made all the works of and within the world good. Well, he had, not has, had Pelagius. So if the claims are right that what Pelagius was teaching in opposition to Augustine was heretical as well, then I reject both of them. But I also reject this false dichotomy that occurs. Oh, Pelagius is obviously a heretic, so you have to accept Augustine. Or on the Arminian side, Augustine's obviously a heretic, so you have to accept Pelagianism. Exceeding good, how much more excellent do you suppose that he made man himself? Well, he did. on whose account he had clearly made everything else. And before actually man, he determines to fashion him in his... Where can I read this, CJ? Because I want to read the full context. I want to read the rest of what Pelagius says as well, not just quotes that, okay, maybe it can mean what people are claiming, but is that the totality of what he taught, what we have available to us? So is Pelagius ignoring Genesis 3? Does Pelagius deny not only inherited guilt, but does Pelagius also deny inherited sin nature, inherited corruption? Right, so he's just as heretical as Augustine. Augustine goes too far and makes us guilty because of Adam's sin. Does Pelagius actually go all the way to the opposite direction and say, oh, we're not sinners at all? We make our own choices. Thank you, CJ. Pelagius's letter to Demetrius. Excellent. I will check it out. Right, well, let's go view that rather than continue with what we're doing, because I'm much more interested in what Pelagius actually said than all these claims about Pelagius from either side. And CJ, do you have the other 3 letters that are believed to be definitely written by him? If you have that available, I would greatly appreciate it. Oh, I agree. Go away. Even if I could claim to possess natural talent of a high quality and an equally high degree of artistic skill, and believe myself for that reason to be capable of fulfilling with ease the obligation of writing, I would still not be able to enter upon this arduous task without considerable fear of the difficulties involved. It is to Demetrius that I have to write, that virgin of Christ who is both noble and rich, and much, which is more important, spurns both nobility and riches. Assuredly, it is as difficult for me to instruct her. Ah, it's a female. I was wondering why it's spelt with an A. There you go. It is as difficult for me to instruct her as it is easy for all to praise her out of admiration for her outstanding virtue. Who could possibly lack words to sing the praises of one who, though born in the highest station, brought up in the height of wealth and luxury, held fast by the strength and variety of this life's delights, as if in the grip of the most tenacious of fetters, suddenly broke free and exchanged all her bodily goods simultaneously for goodness of the soul, of one who cut off with the sword of faith, that is, her own free will, the very flower of a life still only just beginning, and by crucifying her flesh with Christ, dedicated it as a living and holy sacrifice to God, and for love of virginity renounced the prospect of providing posterity for a very noble stock. So she's given herself over to the life of a virgin, surrendered to Christ. Well, I don't agree with that, but if I understand what he's saying there, the most noble thing a woman can do is marry and to bring forth, have a family, support her husband. That's what God created women to be the helper. We call it helpmeet, but that's a misunderstanding of English. A helper. The meet there means fitting, suitable, not helpmate. If you use the word helpmate, you don't understand English. But it's become so common, people use it all the time. Stop using it. Helpmate is meaningless. It is a corruption of help meet. And the meet there is a verb, meaning suitable or fitting. Now, I want to go back and read that sentence again, because I want to know what he's saying here about free will. of one who cut off with the sword of faith, that is her own free will. So she chose, he's saying, the very flower of a life still only just beginning, and by crucifying her flesh with Christ, dedicated it as a living and holy sacrifice to God, and for love of virginity, renounced the prospect of providing posterity for a very noble stock, ? So this is continuing this question. Who could possibly lack words to sing the praises of one who surrendered to Christ? An easy, simple way to make a speech is to let the very richness of the subject matter speed it along its course, but we have to proceed along a very different road, since our purpose is to write a manual of instruction for the Virgin, not an encomium. Okay. I thought you were supposed to translate this. Poppy, who uses the word encomium anymore? Oh, I need a bigger table. Paste meaning. Oh, encomium, a speech or piece of writing that praises someone or something highly. Oh, okay. So what does he say that he's doing instead? Manual of instruction, not a letter of praise. Okay. Why didn't you just say that? To portray not so much the virtues which she had already acquired as those which she has still to acquire, and to order the remainder of her life, rather than to honour that part of it which is now in the past. 2. It is, however, very hard to deal with the character of one in whom there is such desire to learn, such eagerness for perfection, that no teaching, however admirable, can really meet her needs. She rightly remembers what worldly wealth and honour she has rejected, what pleasures she has renounced, in a word, what attractions of this present life she has spurned, and for that reason she is dissatisfied with this common mediocre kind of life of ours, and finding herself to be easily capable of being cheapened by mere association with the majority, seeks something new and unusual, and looks for a special and singular quality of some kind in her life. She wants her conduct to become no less an object of wonder than her conversion has been. Already noble in this world, she desires to be even nobler before God, and seeks in her moral conduct values as precious as the objects which she spurned in this world. I see nothing to object to so far. In fact, this is excellent. She wants her conduct to become no less an object of wonder than her conversion has been. Now, unless her conversion was something she did, then that would be a mean of concern, but I don't see that indicated here yet. And so, since conversion is something only God does, can we assume, unless we have evidence to the contrary, that her conduct is something that God does to be equally an object of wonder? Because we can't achieve that. Already noble in this world, she desires to be even nobler before God, and seeks in her moral conduct values as precious as the objects which she spurned in this world. Excuse me. What outpouring of talent will ever satisfy a mind so enthusiastic and dedicated, so thirsty for a high degree of perfection? What power of speech, what fluency will ever be able to express in mere words all that this virgin is ready to fulfill by deeds? Yet we are entitled to crave indulgence when we offer a gift for the adornment of the Lord's temple, which is only in proportion to our own powers. Nor need we have any fear of exposing ourselves voluntarily to the malicious stings of envy by writing so rashly to such a noble virgin. We write at the request, nay, by the command of her venerable mother, who solicits it from us in a letter sent across the sea, and revealing the remarkable force of her heartfelt desire. And as we saw earlier, that's probably why it was called Pelagius, across the sea. Thus she shows us with the greatest of ease the zeal and care with which she has planted the heavenly seed in her daughter, and how she now desires it to be watered by others just as punctiliously. Good gracious. Dum, 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 dum. marked by or concerned about precise accordance with the details of codes or conventions. Okay. I've got a vague idea. Just as correctly would be clearer modern English. Well, punctilious is modern English, but common, let's use that word, correctly. And so, free from any charge of rashness or vain ambition, let us bend our energies to our appointed task, and let us not lose confidence on the grounds of our moderate ability, since we do believe that it is being assisted both by the mother's faith and by the daughter's merit. He doesn't mention God there, but is that just, well, that's not really his point, is it? I'm going to accord him grace for the moment until he has proven himself to be a heretic. Whenever I have to speak on the subject of moral instruction and the conduct of a holy life, it is my practice first to demonstrate the power and quality of human nature. That sounds very concerning, especially considering what he's been accused of, and to show what it is capable of achieving. Well, I'd like to suggest to you, Pelagius, that it is capable of achieving nothing. Only God can achieve it. And then to go on to encourage the mind of my listener to consider the idea of different kinds of virtues, in case it may be of little or no profit to him to be summoned to pursue ends which he has perhaps assumed hitherto to be beyond his reach. For we can never enter upon the path of virtue unless we have hope as our guide and companion, and if every effort expended in seeking something is nullified in effect by despair of ever finding it. I assume someone's used someone has used text software to convert this, and the I has come out as a 1. And that the software is too stupid to realize that this isn't a sentence. A human being instantly recognizes, no, it's obviously a 1, an I. I'd like to see the original text for this and how they got a 1 out of an I. I also think that on this occasion, when the good in our nature calls for a fuller exposition commensurate with the greater perfection of life, which has to be inculcated in the listener's mind, I have special grounds for adhering to the same sequence of exhortation as I have followed in my other minor works, in order that the mind may not become more negligent and sluggish in its pursuit of virtue as it comes to believe less in its ability to achieve it. See, once again, focusing too much on human ability, supposing itself not to possess something simply because it is unaware that it is present within. But what does he mean by that? Well, we shall see. When it is desirable for a man to put a certain capacity, notice that he's mentioned conversion. If he fully is ignoring Genesis chapter 3, as that quote seems to suggest that CJ provided, then why does he mention conversion, and what does he mean by conversion? When it is desirable for a man to put a certain capacity to use, it always has to be brought to his attention, and any good of which human nature is capable has to be revealed. Is that what he means by conversion? Some sort of the secret type of conversion, that we become aware of our ability, that the switch is flicked? This idea that is supposedly attributed to Albert Einstein, that we only use 10% of our brains, and if we could use 100% of our brains, what we could accomplish. And apparently, as far as I can tell, Einstein never said anything of the sort. I don't know who said it and who first claimed that Einstein said it, but it's a load of garbage. Even if Einstein did say it, it's a load of garbage. We use 100% of our brain all the time. It's how we use that 100% that determines whether we operate as idiots or saints. When it is desirable for a man to put a certain capacity to use, it always has to be brought to his attention, and any good of which human nature is capable has to be revealed, since what is shown to be practicable must be put into practice. Let us then lay this down as the first basis for a holy and spiritual life. The virgin must recognize her own strengths. She has none, which she will be able to employ to the full only when she has learned that she possesses them. Yeah, this is humanism. I'm going to side with the Calvinists in opposing Pelagius. Not once has he mentioned God anywhere in here that I can see. Did I miss it? Oh, nobler before God. So it's a deistic God. He's created us perfect. We just need to realize it. That's the conversion. Nothing about Christ, nothing about his sacrifice, nothing about conversion being acknowledging that we are sinners in absolute, complete dependence upon God. Not just that God's grace is provided to us and helps us do better than we might have otherwise. No, we're completely dependent upon God's grace. And this is where CJ quoted from. So I'm going to agree with you, CJ. He is a Pelagian. He believes in the inherent goodness of human beings. Well, there we go. How sad. But now we know. Okay, I'm going to bookmark that under my Pelagius stream. So Pelagianism is heretical as well. New folder. Pelagian. Or Pelagius. Let's just call it Pelagius for now. There we go. Sorted. How sad. How very, very, very pathetically sad. I'm very disappointed. But I shouldn't be. He's a human being. He's in the 400s AD. So Richard says, everything I have seen you scroll in humanist is humanist. Yeah, he's a humanist. Thank you, CJ. You've helped me come to my conclusion. Luckily for you, I agree with you. Oh, dear. Yeah, well, CJ, we can discuss that tomorrow. I think you're being unfair as well. I just read your email. So, yeah, we can discuss that in about, if I remember correctly, in about 23 hours, if that's still okay for you to join me in 23 hours for a stream. I would love to discuss that with you. I have my concerns with Leighton. I think you're going too far. I think Leighton is careless, but not as much as you think that he is. Well, I don't have any more to do. Did Pelagius teach Pelagianism? Yes, as far as I can tell, he absolutely did. And people who want to support Pelagius seem to be humanists. And Leighton is at best being careless and ignorant. Yeah, I still stand with Pelagius in rejecting Augustine's three heresies of inherited guilt, baptismal regeneration, while his view of grace, I need to find out more about that. That was the other article we were reading, actually. That was this one. That's right. Where was it? It is clear that Pelagius rejected the Augustinian understanding of grace. Where is the quote from earlier? I don't know if you were here for this, CJ. Where was it? Oh, there it is. So this is a quote. I don't know who this quote is from. While in Rome, he began to articulate his theological views in a commentary on the Pauline epistles, quote, in which he set out his opposition to such Augustinian doctrines as the inherited guilt of original sin, rigid predestination, in other words, determinism, which is what Augustine was wrong about grace on. And I agree with Pelagius that those were wrong, but I don't agree with Pelagius's position. What he pushed back against is just as wrong, if not more wrong. But I find it abhorrent, the idea that we inherited guilt from Adam. And rigid predestination, determinism, although CJ may disagree, no, it wasn't. But I think it was. And the necessity of baptism to spare infants from hell. Well, I stand with Pelagius on these things. Augustine should have been excommunicated as a heretic. But anyway, we can discuss that tomorrow, CJ. I will keep that open and highlighted. And let me go down to footnote 6. Oh, it's at the bottom of that same page. Idiot. Footnote 6, B.R. Rees, Pelagius, a reluctant heretic. What's that? 8. No, sorry, 13. Idiot. 13. Hey, let's look up this link. Oh, no, I don't trust it. I would rather copy it. Copy into a paste. Make sure that nothing funny is going on. Library of Theology, Pelagianism writings. Page not found. Thanks. Thanks for that. Thanks for giving me a useless link. Okay, well, let's try searching for it instead. Grace in the Pelagian Controversy, A Tale of Two Ditches. Hey, that sounds like a good work. I'd be interested to know what that one teaches. Augustine was in one ditch and Pelagius was in the other ditch. Both of them were wrong, and the church sided with one heretic over the other. You'll disagree, of course, CJ, but that is definitely my position and becoming more and more so. But we'll keep working on it. I'm open to being proven wrong. I don't know. Have we got any more to do? I feel like I just need to shut this down unless then someone wants to join me. I don't have any more to say. I feel like we're done. And Kevin, if you're listening to this later and go, oh no, I wanted to keep reading that. I want to hear more of what Pelagius has to say because it hasn't convinced you yet. I do have the link. I can provide you with that link if you're not convinced yet. But as far as I'm concerned, we're done. It's over.
And the glory forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. How long is that? And ever. And when you get through with all of the forevers, then amen.
I love that. I want to listen to that again. We're done.
And the glory forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. How long is that? And ever. And when you get through with all of the forevers, then amen.
The one problem with that is it starts with, and the glory forever. Kevin, you need to include, for thine is the kingdom and the glory forever and ever and ever, because it doesn't make sense. And the glory forever? Really? But I appreciate you having done it for me, if you don't mind. Of forever. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Two more comments. Well, for the record, Augustine did get some things wrong. His views on theocracy and baptism I strongly disagree with. However, I will defend him slightly in that many then and now seem to think baptism is optional. It's not. The Bible commands us to be baptized, not for salvation, but nevertheless. Yeah, defend him slightly, except that he was claiming babies need to be baptized. That's the problem. I will agree with him that baptism is necessary. Absolutely agree with that. If you don't get baptized, I wonder if you're a Christian. You don't get baptized to be saved, but if you're a Christian and don't get baptized, I wonder whether you're a Christian. You don't seem to have the Holy Spirit teaching you all things that Jesus taught, which includes that you must be baptized. It's a command. And it immediately follows conversion, or should. Well, it should be immediate. And yes, it doesn't need a pastor. It just needs another Christian. There's nothing in Scripture to indicate that it has to be some special Christian. There are no special Christians. I hate this idea. Brought in by Roman Catholicism, brought in by paganism, turning the church into a hierarchy where some Christians are above other Christians. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. So I'm glad I can stand with CJ on some issues. We do have a fairly stark disagreement on one specific issue, really. But we stand in agreement on almost everything. And I can consider CJ my brother, no matter how much we disagree on determinism or whatever you want to call it, Calvinism, or CJ calls it reformed, or anyway, I'm going to shut this down. I don't think we're achieving any more on the topic of Pelagius now. And I'll probably start another stream shortly. I just want to remind people of the gospel. Before we close, I always like to do that. And I am going to try and collect more and more gospel. CJ, can you record a 1 minute to, let's call it 3 minute? 1 or 3 minutes. You can do less than 1 minute if you want. I've got a 16-second one. In fact, I'll play that now. If you can record something around that time frame, less than 3 minutes, on the gospel for me. Richard, if you're able to do it, and then share it through Google Drive since you have terrible internet, or anybody else who's listening to me who wants to share a gospel presentation in less than 3 minutes. It can be less than a minute. It can be a minute, 2 minutes, anywhere in there, up to 3 minutes. I'd love to have more gospel presentations to share at the end of my stream. If you have to, go over 3 minutes, but try to restrict it to less than 3 minutes.
God is holy. We are sinners. We have rebelled against his law. We are liars and thieves and blasphemers. So Christ died in our place. Trust him. Repent of your sin and trust Christ, and you will be born again.
And you will be a new creation, walking in newness of life, but you won't have an inherent righteousness. I'm still trying to work out exactly what that means. Anyway, trust the gospel. Continue to trust the gospel. Continue to study the gospel and keep trusting it. Continue to grow in it. God bless you all. Catch you next time.